Are you serious? There's a danger in cropping an image in Photoshop? Let's do it. Okay, everybody, let's take a look at the dangers of cropping an image in Photoshop. But before we do that, let's talk about what I was taught in photography years ago. This is way back in, say, 2005 when I was taking classes in photography. Let's talk about cropping in our camera. I mean, true professionals, it was pounded into my head. True professionals crop in the camera. They don't crop afterwards. Okay, now think about it. In the earlier days, Photoshop did not exist. We were not using digital cameras. And so these iconic photographers were shooting in film, and they were just experts at cropping right in the camera, getting exactly what they want. So let me share some images with you to prove my point on this. So first of all, we're going to take a look at, again, just a reminder, all professionals crop in camera. Remember that, remember that, remember that. First lesson right here, Irving Penn. Most people have heard of Irving Penn if you studied photography, and one of his famous pictures is a picture of the artist Picasso right there. I mean, look at that image, how great it is, and let's take a look at the negative from that photo. Whoa, move on, nothing to see here, nothing to see here. Okay, let's take a look at Arnold Newman, famous photographer. Look at this, this is Stravinsky, the pianist. This looks like graphic art. This is incredible. Look how they cropped that in the camera. Take a look at the negative. Whoa, 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 whoa. Nothing to see here. Let's move on. How about Elliot Irwin? He was known as a street photographer, even though he did some other things. But one of my favorite images, iconic images right there. Unfreaking believable how he was able to get down on that and frame that image. Let's look at the negative. Whoa, whoa, nothing to see here. Nothing to see here. Okay, I'm sorry. This is, I apologize. I apologize. I apologize. I get it. I get it. People, I understand. It's a bunch of BS. That BS was pounded into my head years ago. And what I want to prove to you and show you that there is not only a danger in cropping in your camera, but there's a danger of cropping in Photoshop. So let's take a look at that. Okay, here I am in Photoshop, and a couple disclaimers. Number one is there's always exception to rules. And yes, I understand if you're like, I know a couple landscape photographers who do crop in the camera. And so that's an example of there's always exception to rules. But most of us on the average don't do that kind of thing. And cropping in the camera could cause some problems. So my second disclaimer is I have an image here that is a stock image. And the reason I'm using a stock image of this group shot is, and again, I'm being very honest, I was just freaking lazy. This happened to me back in 2005 when I started photography. And I was doing weddings, and it was always pounded into my head, crop in the camera, crop in the camera, crop in the camera. And all of a sudden, it caused a couple major problems with Photoshop. One, I'll talk about first, and that's the problem with cropping in a camera that can cause you a problem. And then the second is something that has happened for years, that I think Adobe has made a mistake in cropping in the camera, in the software. So I'll deal with that a little bit later. So because I was lazy and I didn't want to go past to my archives to find the image, right, I actually ran into a problem in cropping in the camera. Here's an example. This is, again, a stock image I have opened up in Photoshop. And let's just pretend this is a group shot that I took. It could be a wedding, whatever the group is. And your digital cameras, if it's generally a major, what they call an APS-C crop sensor, full frame, you're generally shooting in what they call a 2:3 aspect ratio, which traditionally gives you a 4:6, small print. So as an example, if I grab the crop tool, so C for crop, here we go again. I always say C for crop for crop. If I tap on the letter C, that grabs the crop tool right here. in Photoshop. And by default, it just puts the crop tool activated there. But if I go to this drop-down menu over here where it says ratio, if I take a look at 2:3 as an aspect ratio, you'll see that it just puts in a 2:3 crop right there. But whoa, this is portrait. Well, it doesn't know that. So if you click right here, it reverses it, and now it makes it a landscape crop. So you can actually see that that is my 2:3 crop. Okay, now that could be great for a 4:6 print. It could be an 8:12 print, which is not really that popular, but you can find mats and frames that fit that. But here's the thing. I actually did this in a wedding. I think it was my third or fourth wedding. I don't know exactly when, but 2000, let's just say 2005. I think it was like in the fall of 2005. And again, I was taught, hey, you crop in the camera, you crop in the camera. So I did this group shot. Now, here's the problem with cropping in the camera, and here's the exception to the rule. If you are doing this for yourself, go for it. Crop in the camera, who cares? Because it's for you. But if you're doing stuff for a client, you don't know exactly what they want. And guess what they said? Oh, we want a 14:11 print. And I go, okay. So when I go to this drop-down menu here, and of course I don't see anything that says 14:11 or in this example 11:14 versus again 14:11. So I'm going to put in 14 because it's a landscape by 11. And here's the problem. Can you see? I'm cutting off the people on the ends. That's the problem. So now what do? I can't magically make stuff appear and stuff. So if I expand this out in Photoshop, so I'm going to click and drag this to the edge and also to the edge over here. Well, you can see I've got space above there and below there. I can't make this fit. So what am I going to do now? And I mean, I could fake it where I was doing extra work by stretching it on the bottom, stretching it to the top. The point is this, it's extra work, and I don't want to do that. So I changed my mind down the road because I learned this from other people that have a little bit better experience, and that is you never do that. You overshoot. So I'll bring a different example where you overshoot your group shots so you can crop it in any aspect ratio the client wants, and you don't have to do extra work. That's called working smarter, not harder. But I didn't know because I was taught to crop in the frickin' camera. Okay, so now just to show you that in Photoshop, there's a new feature that's been around for a while, but way back when, never had that. And that is right here. It says content aware. Now, before I choose that, I'm going to cancel out of this. So let me go to the, let's right mouse click here. And I'm just going to say to, not only clear the aspect ratio, but I'm going to cancel the crop. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to duplicate, Control J. So I can do a quick before and after of this. And then now I'll move this back to the way it was because the client says they want 11:14 and I got to deliver what the client wants. And luckily I have a newer version of Photoshop that's been around for a while, but I'm going to tell you a few years ago, we never had this, and it's called Content Aware right here. If I activate that and I click on this check mark, it's going to analyze the extension I just did and try to create the pixels for me automatically. So let's see what happens. It takes a few seconds for this to generate and work. And again, we'll see what the results will be. And I'm going to tell you, it's either going to be pretty cool or it's just going to be a total mess. And you're going to have to go back and decide that you're going to clone and stretch and do a bunch of other things. So let's take a look at this right now. If I expand this out, I'm going to tell you something. It did a great job on the floor area, but I see a little anomaly there. So easy to clean that up with the clone tool or whatever, or patch tool. But let's take a look at the very top. Now, this does not look right. If you look at here, I don't know if those are the bricks or whatever, but let me show you before and after. There's before and there's after. Now this looks like it's a statue right here. Okay, but if I expand this, it just looks like a blob. So this is not acceptable. And I'm going to have to do some other techniques, and I could probably fix this over time, but the point is this: it's extra work. Why in the heck do I want to create this extra work? So let me close out of this and show you a better way. And so that is the danger. If you crop in the camera, let me just reemphasize this. If you crop in the camera and you're doing it for yourself, go for it, because it's for you. But if you're doing stuff for a client, you have no idea if I want an 8 by 10, 11 by 14 or whatever, and they want different aspect ratios, and you're going, oh, and that's the problem I ran into when a client said, I need an 11 by 14 or a 14 by 11 on this, and I couldn't deliver that. And I had to fudge it, and I was embarrassed, and I thought, never, ever again. That is BS. So I never crop in the frame when I'm doing client work. It's always out further so I can give them any aspect ratio they want. So I'm not going to save this. So let me show you an example of the way I would shoot. And again, just let me just go back here to the crop tool, and let's just clear that. I'm going to hit the clear, so we're just back to normal here. And I think this should be a 2:3 aspect ratio. So if I click here, that just reverses it right there. So there we are. So let me make this a little bit smaller so we can see this. Okay, so this is overshot. This is the way I would typically shoot today and have been for years on group shots. Now, again, as a disclaimer, this is just a stock image I got instead of finding something from my past to bring in. But this is the way I would normally shoot. So, and again, example, here's the danger of cropping in Photoshop. And we have been arguing, I can't say arguing, but trying to convince and emphasize Adobe that your default setting, we would like to see changed. So if I grab the crop tool as an example, you're going to see over here, it says delete crop pixels. You just need to know this. By default, that is activated. And we've been trying to convince Adobe that it should not be activated. That means that by default, if we're working in Photoshop, we're doing non-destructive cropping, and we can bring back things if we change our mind, say a day or a week or a month from now. But if I use the default setting called crop, delete crop pixels, once it's cropped, it gets rid of everything else. And that's the danger in cropping in Photoshop. So I'll give you an example. If I decide to change this to let's just do 14 by 11. That's my ratio up there. And you can see that, I'm not a big fan of cutting their feet off. I didn't do this. Again, stock image. If I pull this in quite a bit and move this up like that as my crop, and then select that by just choosing this or enter on my keyboard. Okay, that's my crop. If they want a 5 by 7 or 7 by whatever, 8 by 10, it doesn't matter. I can make that aspect ratio work for that image. But here's the problem. But because delete crop pixels is activated, once I save this, I can't change my mind. That's gone. Now, hopefully I have a backup copy of that. But I think a better way of doing this, I'm going to undo this with Control Z, and that is to deselect that right there that says delete crop pixels. A lot of us have been fighting back to Adobe saying that should be our default setting, but it's not. And we know better as experienced users in Photoshop. But if you're new to Photoshop, you don't know. And I've had so many people come back to me and say, oh, I screwed up my image because I cropped it, then I changed my mind, and now I lost all that information. And I'm thinking, well, didn't you make a backup copy of your original? No, I didn't make a backup. So I feel sorry for them, but what are you going to do? So I'm trying to emphasize this should be your default, and that is to turn that off. But yet still today in 2023, that is your default. So let me just show you a little caveat here. If I decide to make this, let me go to this ratio drop-down menu, and I'm just goofing around here. Oh, let's do a 1x1 square. And I'm going to click and drag, and let's say this is what I want. Okay, and again, I'm just sort of goofing around with this. And this is deactivated, and I click on the check mark to accept this crop or enter the keyboard. And I close out of this. I save this. Little hint, you have to save this as a PSD file or as a TIFF file. If you do not, you have lost that information like a JPEG, right? You don't want to save this as a JPEG because that information is gone. Save it as TIFF, save it as PSD. That way, if you ever come back again and let's say, okay, open this up, and I come to the crop tool and go, oh shoot, I changed my mind. I want to make this a 5x7, but we need to reverse that so it's landscape instead of portrait style. Look what happened. All that information came back, and I could readjust this and say, okay, that's what I want. Select that to confirm it, and boom, there I go. See what my point is? This is non-destructive cropping in Photoshop. Yes, I know in Lightroom you can do non-destructive cropping, but a lot of times people are taking stuff from Lightroom, throwing it into Photoshop, and they go, oh, I want to adjust the cropping. And they do this, and they're deleting the pixels, and then they can't go back. So that is a danger in Photoshop. So let me repeat this. Number one, the danger in cropping in Photoshop is this: delete crop pixels, turn it off. And then please save it as a PSD or as a TIFF. And then you can export it out always as a JPEG, but you can always go back to the PSD or the TIFF and readjust your aspect ratios and not lose any of the original information. Number two, again, I don't know what kind of work that you do, but most of us, we're not like landscape. I mean, I know landscape photographers that still crop, and I know some that don't crop. But I'm going to tell you that most of us, we do end up cropping. So my point is, especially when you're doing group shots, weddings, family shoots, whatever it is, I would overshoot the image, and then you can go in and put in any aspect ratio you want because you're doing client work. That's the key. You're doing client work. If you're not doing client work, who cares? You're doing it for you. You know what you want. Okay, I get it. Frame it, crop it in the camera. But if you're not sure, you're doing this for somebody else, my feeling is overshoot it, and then you can do any aspect ratio for the client based on their needs. Okay, hopefully that makes sense to you guys and you learned a couple things. If that didn't come across clear, please email me. And let's just end this right now. Hopefully you learned some cool concepts right here. So again, once again, hopefully you learned something in this session. And if you could please do me a favor, and that is hit the like button, subscribe if you have not subscribed, and hit that notification bell so the next time I upload a video, you will get notified. Okay, with that out of the way, I'm just going to throw this out again. You know my ending all the time, and that is keep thinking out of the box, literally out of the box. Get that camera, start getting creative, and shoot. Until the next time, see ya.